Stripe is a payments processor that allows developers like you and me to easily collect payments on our websites. In this video, I'll show you how you can implement Stripe payments into your Nextjs application. I'm going to start from the very beginning, and you can pick up wherever you want to in the video. Timestamps will be in the description below, and without further ado, let's get started. We'll get started in this tutorial by first creating a Nextjs project. Make sure that you have Node.js 18.17 installed or a later version. I have that installed, so I'm just going to copy this command and paste it into my terminal, and this will create a Nextjs application for me. I'm going to name this project Stripe Payments, but feel free to name it whatever you want. I'm going to use TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind. I am not going to use a source directory. I'm not going to use app router, and we'll select no for the import alias, and now we wait. Now open this project in whatever text editor you use. And with this open, I'm going to go into the page called index, and I'm going to delete all of this markup, and I'm just going to create a heading which says Stripe Payments. And then I'm going to open up my terminal. You can do this with Control tilde, and I'm going to run the command npm run dev, and this will start up the development server for the application. So obviously, if you're creating a production application, you're going to want some more markup than just Stripe payments. So really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting a payment link onto whatever web page we're selling our item from. In my case, it's just this main homepage, this index file, and just make sure to apply this to your scenario. So with our development server up and running, let's go to localhost port 3000, and we see that it is running and working as it should be. So now let's get started with Stripe. So now we're going to go to stripe.com. And here, if you don't already have an account, you're going to need to create one. I'm signed in, so I'm just going to go to my dashboard. And in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to need to create a new account if you don't have an account already. But once you have that done, enable test mode, and then go to payments on the left-hand side. The screen might look a little different for you, but if it looks like this, search for create payment and then payment link. If it doesn't look like this, there is usually a big card here which says payment link, and that's what you want to click on. Now here is where you can choose different options. So if you want to collect the customer's information or add in custom fields, feel free to do so, but I'm just going to choose the collect tax automatically selection, and then I'm going to add a new product. This is going to be a fake product, but you should actually put in the real information of what you're trying to sell. Once you have your product selected and created, you might want to change the after payment. So this will be what happens after your user or customer pays. You can redirect them to your website, or you can just show them a confirmation page. Now, one thing to note is that if you're in development and you're redirecting back to your local host, it hasn't worked in the past for me. So what you might have to do is you might have to say 127.0.0.1. And essentially that's just saying, that's another way of saying localhost, but you're just using IPv4 instead. But we aren't going to do that for this tutorial, and I am just going to go up in the top right hand corner and say create link. Now we have a payment link, so let's copy this and let's go back into our Nextjs application. Now in our application, we're going to want to create a button, and for me, I'm using Tailwind, so I can just use an anchor tag, and we're going to assign the href to that link, which we just copied. And you can say target equals underscore underscore blank to open it in a new tab, but I'm just going to leave that as is, and then we'll say buy now. And of course, you're going to want to make this look better on your own website. This will suffice for the tutorial. And above this, we will put in some text, just labeling it what is the customer actually buying. I'll add some styles to this so that it actually looks like a button. And now when we go back to localhost port 3000, we see this. Now, whenever we go in and say buy now, we get taken to the checkout page. So this is where your user will enter in all of their information, and essentially we are done with the front end. So now we need to head on to the back end of our application and get started there. So on our back end, what we want to do is once the customer is done paying for their product, we might want to send them an email, or we might want to save their information. We might want to change some information about their account. We might just want to handle them actually purchasing something. So that's what we're going to have to do on the back end. And in order to do that, we have to install the Stripe CLI first. So go to the link in the description labeled Stripe CLI, and it will take you to this web page. Now you just need to install the Stripe CLI onto your machine and go through these steps of logging in. And once you're done with that, go back to your code, and in the API folder, we will create another file. I'm going to call this webhook, but feel free to call it whatever you want. It's just going to be the place where we tell Stripe to send different events to. Now we need to install two different packages, so Control tilde to open up the terminal, and we'll open up a new terminal, and then we will say npm install Stripe and raw-body. And now we'll get our imports from Next, Stripe, and raw-body, and then create a local environment file in Nextjs that will be .env.local. Create two new variables, one called Stripe secret key and another called webhook secret. And then let's navigate back to our Stripe dashboard. And here go to the developers pane, or the developers page, and then look for API keys. And you'll see the secret key. You're going to want to reveal this, copy it, and then assign that as the Stripe secret key. Now back in webhook, we'll have to create a new Stripe object, passing in our secret key and the API version. The current version I'm running is 2023-1016, but if you're watching this in the future, it will probably be a newer version. Next, we'll get the endpoint secret, and we'll fill this out later, but just know that it's important for this particular route. And for this route, we want to make sure that the body parser is set to false. This is Nextjs specific, but if you don't do this, you'll get a stream not readable error. Now we need to export a default function. So this will be the business logic that a user will get hit with whenever they reach this API endpoint. So I'm just going to call that handler, and it takes in a next API request and next API response. We'll wrap everything in a try-catch block, and then make sure that you only accept post requests on this particular endpoint. Then we'll get the headers to make sure that the request was sent from Stripe, as well as the raw body. And then we need to create a Stripe event. And if we get an error during this, it means that the request wasn't sent from Stripe. So if we don't get that, we'll just log the event type, and we'll handle the different event types which we want to handle. So in this instance, we're going to be handling whenever the checkout was completed. So let's go through that. First, we'll get the session line items. And if there are no line items, then we'll just send a status of 500. And now we can implement our business logic. So this is where you do whatever you need to do in order to respond to that customer successful checkout. So on a personal site of mine called revesta.net, I change the user's account information so that they can now view more in-depth data. And this is just going to be logging stuff to the console, but this is where you would do that. And if you get an error during this, you need to make sure to handle that, because a user has gone through their checkout successfully, but you haven't actually delivered them their product. And down here at the very end, we will send a status of 200. And for any errors in the outermost try-catch block, we will log them to the console, and we'll send a status of 500. So now that this route is set up, we now need to tell Stripe to send any events to this particular endpoint. So open up your terminal. Now enter the command stripe listen /to localhost port 3000 /API/webhook. And this is where we will get our webhook secret. So make sure to copy this and paste it in your environment file. Now with that done, let's go back to localhost port 3000 and we will click on the link to buy something. We'll enter in our information. For Stripe, you just enter in 4242 for all of the numbers, and that'll be your test card. Enter in any date. I believe it's any date after the current date, and then the CVC doesn't matter, and neither does the billing address. And here you see that we got a successful post. So let's go to our logs here, and there you can see the different metadata about the purchase. So make sure to use that for whatever you're needing to do once a user checks out and buys your product. Now that's all good for development, but if you're actually wanting to go into production with this, you just go back to your Stripe console, check yourself out of test mode, and go through the same exact process, getting the secret key and also creating the products, getting the link. Make sure that you swap the link out for your buttons so that you have the development link in development and the production link when you're in production. And also make sure to swap out the environmental variables. And if you're good with all that, you just need to create a webhook. It's called registering a webhook. Once you're here, you just click on the webhooks, open the webhooks page, and this is where you will create your webhook. You will register it, and it will usually look like your website name /API/webhook. And once that's all done, you can now start accepting payments. So I hope that you found this video useful. Let me know if you have any comments down below, and thank you very much for watching.